lovely people. It is Victoria. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. So, this is going to be a bit of an update on the Tana Mongeau and Cody Co situation. I initially wasn't sure if I was going to make another video about this because the reaction to my first one was very polarized. It was definitely pretty opinion based and pretty strongly worded, and I got a lot of constructive criticism about the way I presented the information, and I made a follow-up video talking about it, about how it could have been more journalistic and I could have been emphasizing my sources more and actually giving more solid background information. So that was definitely legit. So I wanted to kind of do a take two, but also just so much has happened in the situation, but also the coverage of the situation, that I just felt like it was necessary, and I feel like there's a lot to talk about. So here we are. So for background, the two main people involved are Cody Co, a popular commentary YouTube channel, and Tana Mongeau, a popular storytime slash vlog-ish YouTuber and podcaster. She has a very successful podcast called Cancelled with her friend Brooke Schofield, which I am honestly a really big fan of. I've been a fan of both of them for years, honestly. Tana a little more inconsistently than Cody. I discovered Tana in 2017 and Cody in 2017 as well, actually. I think I actually discovered their content in the same year. So for background, Tana and Brooke were recently on a tour for their podcast, and it was a pretty known thing that they didn't want any bits of the show to be released online, and so it was kind of a thing that people didn't record, and for the most part, nobody ever posted anything, and so they felt pretty secure sharing their secrets. And so during one show, there was a quick fire Q&A that Tana was doing, and I guess she also later talked about at this specific show she was having really bad diarrhea, and she just felt especially unfiltered and just candid, and she was asked who had the smallest dick that she's ever had sex with, and she said Cody Co. Everyone reacts and is like, oh my god, and then she says, I can say that, I was literally 17, I can say that. And everyone's shocked and is like, oh my god, delete the videos. Brooke and Paige are like, no one posts, da-da-da. And it was definitely a jokey, oh my god kind of environment, which makes sense because it was at a show meant to entertain people. So this clip started circulating on TikTok, and people started talking about it on YouTube, mainly kind of drama tea channels. It caused some older content to resurface, including the collabs that the two of them did years ago and the way that they were interacting with each other, their energy, the way Cody was looking at her. Also, an older episode of Tana's podcast where she talks about hooking up with older people when she was, quote, 17 at the time, 18. And some people have later speculated if she was adding in the 18 to try to soften the blow or make it seem more legal or more just okay than it may have been. But she shouts out JC Caylen and Cody Co. And JC Caylen has kind of gotten off scot-free, and some people have pointed this out and tried to emphasize that he did this as well, and he's only 2 years younger than Cody. So if he was with Tana when she was 17, assuming that that's accurate for him as well, obviously no proof of this, but he would have been 23 at the time, and that's still very questionable and wrong, and I just don't agree with that. So anyway, so this content starts resurfacing as well. People realize she's been talking about this for a while, actually, or she has mentioned this. And to a small extent, people were talking about this pretty soon after it became publicly known. And after Tana started talking about this, right after this podcast episode, Inabber pointed this out in his recent video, that right after this 2021 podcast episode where Tana shouts out JC Caylen and Cody Co., Angelica Oles, who I've been watching for years, and it's so crazy I didn't know this, she made a video talking about this, pretty soon after Tana talked about it. And was like, this is likely what happened, and Cody would have been 25 at the time, da-da-da-da. And the conversation kind of ended there. It didn't really spread beyond that, and there was just not really any questioning of it. And I don't even know, I wasn't aware of this. I was a fan of both of them, and I started watching them at right around the same time, and I had no idea. So in the initial rounds of this clip on social media, it seemed like the subject was being approached in a very jokey way, especially because it was at this type of show. But then Tana later talked about it in an episode of Canceled. She doesn't mention Cody in the title of the episode, so just looking at it, you wouldn't know that she was going to talk about it. She talks about it near the end of this episode with Paige, and she confirms her allegation that it happened and said, yes, I hooked up with him when I was 17 and he was 25. She also brings forward this anecdote of them hooking up when they were at Playlist Live, and she doesn't specify exactly which one, but people say that, or people like most commonly believe that it was the main one in Orlando in April of 2016 when Tana would have been 17 at the time. She claims that at Playlist, Gabbie Hanna pulled him aside and told him that she was 17, and they still went and hooked up. And I actually, in my initial video, I said I'm not a big fan of Gabbie, but like, you got to give her flowers. Like, at least that's a line that she didn't cross in being permissive with predatory behavior. And yes, but also I just happened to completely forget that Tana has previously mentioned a time when she was told Gabbie was trying to sell a story that we basically know now is this story, that Gabbie was trying to sell this story about her hooking up with a way older YouTuber. So, and then Tana was like, and I just think sometimes about what if that was my trauma? And it's interesting because she says in this podcast episode that she doesn't consciously identify it as trauma or view it as a super traumatic experience, but that she does know objectively that it was wrong. And she does acknowledge that it may have had an effect on her beyond what she can consciously feel or consciously differentiate as an effect, which is legitimate because a lot of times things can affect you in ways that you're not consciously aware of. But yeah, I forgot that Gabbie tried to sell that story, according to Tana, and yeah, that's pretty shitty. She also confirms in this podcast episode that she was a fan of his and says that she loved his content from a really young age. And I wasn't really into Cody. I wasn't really into Vine in general, but I didn't know about Cody when he was in his Vine era, and I forget sometimes how far back his content goes and that he's been making content for a long time. She also confirms that she is alleging that a crime took place, and she says this isn't some silly tea, it was a crime, which it would have been in Florida, for example, if it did happen at Orlando Playlist Live in April of 2016, because the age of consent in Florida is 18. And even assuming that they hooked up before then, or just around that same time period in California, where it seems like they both were living at the time, the age of consent there is also 18, so it would have been an alleged crime there as well. She also says that when she first started speaking about the situation in 2021 with that earlier referenced podcast episode where she shouts him out, that he texted her and asked her if they were good, and she said yeah, because she thought that they were, and he referenced his upcoming wedding and was like, my wedding's coming up. And some people have later taken this and view this as some kind of like low-key confession or acknowledgement that something did happen, or that there was a situation to ask if they were good about. She also says that a lot of people have slut-shamed her for it and have not believed her because it's Tana, and that she is worried about how witnessing that reaction may discourage other people from coming forward with similar experiences. So people did start covering this pretty quickly after this resurgence of interest with this initial TikTok leak. Like channels that I watch, like Angelica Oles and Adam McIntyre, were talking about it. H3 also talked about it pretty early on and denounced it. My personal perspective on this was that I believe Tana. I feel some people have denounced comments that are like, I'm not a fan of Tana, but I believe her, and are like, why can't you just say that you believe her? I think it's because fans of Tana that believe her might get discredited by being like, oh, you'll just believe anything she says, or you're gonna be blinded to what she says and you're just biased because you're a fan of her. So I feel like that creates the need to be like, I'm not a fan of her, but I still believe her. I am basically a fan of her, but I have also acknowledged that she's very flawed. She has done a lot wrong, and she does often like kind of victimize herself or try to like be more blameless than she is, while also like taking accountability or saying that she wants to take accountability, and says that she's growing, and then people are all like questioning how much she's grown. That's all totally legitimate, and I think that can be true while those claims that she's making can also be true. I think two things can be true at the same time. And also, while the allegations are of a crime that even if it was technically legal, which a lot of people did initially try to start saying of like, well, age of consent and Romeo and Juliet laws and da-da-da-da, that legality does not always equal morality. And as someone who is 25, my perspective has been that is really gross, and I would never do that's a gross mindset that I don't relate to and don't want to relate to. The differences in mental maturity is so stark at 17 and 25 that to me was just not okay. So the public reaction to this stayed pretty mixed. There were definitely people that were commenting on it early on and definitely denouncing it. Rachel Oates, Angelica Oles, and other like relatively smaller channels. But then D'Angelo Wallace makes a video. And this video would drastically change the dynamic of the conversation. It both put way more eyes on it and also kind of seemed to have given people permission to denounce it more openly or to question the weirdness of the situation and be less afraid of the reaction of his fans. This video also brought additional information to the surface for me that I did not previously know, as someone who had been a fan of him for like 5-6 years, that he had said the N-word in previous Vines, and his method of acknowledging it was through Patreon, that he gave an apology that was only accessible through a paywall. And I didn't realize this, but that apparently is like a tick in a pattern. I don't know. It's just like one element of a pattern of him not fully acknowledging things and then trying to acknowledge it in like the smallest way possible. The D'Angelo video also brought an insane breakthrough because D'Angelo was able to uncover a video of Gabbie Hanna corroborating Tana's account of Playlist Live, where she confronted Cody and told him about Tana being underage. She was on her podcast and recounted telling this guy that this girl was underage and said that he actually thanked her for telling him and then continued to hook up with her. So this created a third-party verification of Tana's account, even though Gabbie Hanna is also like not the most reliable person on the internet, but I am less biased towards her than I am towards Tana, to be completely honest. But like, I also chose to believe her. I chose to believe that this was like legit. But also the fact that she apparently tried to sell this story was shitty, but it kind of ended up, it was a shitty thing, but it ended up having a kind of positive effect because apparently she tried to sell the story, but apparently in trying to do this, she told it to Keemstar. She recounted this encounter to Keemstar, and Keemstar corroborated it and said, Gabbie told me at the time that this happened. So it created an additional verification. Obviously, like, I'm not a fan of Keemstar, and the credibility with which you view him can be up for debate for you, but that is an additional person saying that this playlist encounter happened and that they heard about it at the time. Gabbie has also apparently posted on her Instagram this art piece with this really kind of cryptic caption referencing children and their idols, and some people are wondering if that's in reference to the situation, because she has not actually addressed the situation at all since this has all come out. This video also did a really good job acknowledging another element that people were upset about with this situation, and Cody's past content is his previous promotion and association with an alleged rapist, Colby Leachman. He was accused of, along with one other person, he was accused of drugging and sexually assaulting a woman while videotaping it and showing that videotape to people after the fact. There are some people wondering if Cody would have been one of the people to have seen this video, because it seems like they were associating with each other at the time. I don't know if they were in the same frat or what, but it's not confirmed. But there are some people wondering if Cody and Colby is like a whole mindfuck situation, but if Cody would have seen this video. Colby and the other person were not criminally charged, and they were found not guilty of sexual misconduct by the Duke Disciplinary Board, according to sources that I will link below. However, apparently Duke police had evidence that they brought forward to the DA, who declined to prosecute. So they were found not guilty of misconduct, but apparently there was evidence that the university police brought forward to the DA. So that whole thing is like a big question mark. I choose to believe the accuser, and there has been a lot of questions about the fact that Cody, for years after this situation happened, continued to have this person in his vlogs, continued to promote him, to tell people to follow him on Instagram, and continue to associate with him. And there's like photos going back years of them hanging out together, including Kelsey, and it's confirmed that he was at their wedding. Some people are saying he was in their wedding party. Some people are saying he's his best man. Specifics have not been confirmed, but there are photos of them at their wedding. So it is fair to say that he was at their wedding. So it's reasonable to assume that he's still pretty close with them. And him being at their wedding does contribute to speculation about how much Kelsey knew about the situation, both with Tana, but also her stance on Colby and an accused rapist in her fiance/husband/her own friend group. So overall, D'Angelo's video opened the floodgates officially for way more people to start talking about this, especially bigger YouTubers. Because as I said, like, relatively smaller YouTubers had been talking about this for weeks. But at the time that D'Angelo made his video, he states that nobody with more than 1 million subscribers besides H3 had publicly acknowledged and commented on the situation. But after D'Angelo specifically made his video, it just led to this legitimacy of talking about it and believing Tana and thinking that Cody should acknowledge it. And there are some people that are wondering, like, if it's because it took a powerful man to have a certain stance on it that, like, validated that stance for everybody else, and is wondering, like, how much internalized misogyny has to do with this. Because, like, the woman herself that was involved has been saying this, and people didn't believe it because she didn't fit. I do believe that the perfect victim archetype has to do with why a lot of people chose not to believe Tana. Some people were calling it a boy cry wolf situation, but I think it has to do with the perfect victim thing. But if a man who has a strong reputation, and like, I have no problem with D'Angelo making this video, absolutely at all. I love his content, and it's really important that he talked about it, and I love that he did. He has the reach and the reputation that some of the people that were already talking about it don't. So it makes sense that he would have expanded the conversation, but like, for him to have contributed to it this much and changed the dynamic this much, it is fair to question how much internalized misogyny has to do with it, especially because a lot of the people that were previously talking about it were women. There were a lot of men in there as well. H3, Adam McIntyre, like, a lot of people had talked about it, and other people that I forget their names, but like, a lot of people were talking about it. But people were wondering, like, how much D'Angelo being a powerful male creator had to do with the situation gaining validity in a lot of people's eyes. Other responses have also caused more old content to resurface, like a recent H3 episode brought up an old Tiny Meeking episode where Noelle was talking about the idea of older dudes hooking up with younger girls, and like old dudes flirting with 17-year-olds, and how that's so disgusting. And there's this really unfortunate soundbite of Cody whispering, "That's weird as fuck." Like, whispering, "That's weird as fuck." People are like, so he's acknowledging that kind of behavior is weird. And also, side note, in the older content that he was making with Tana, he was acknowledging that she was a teenager at the time. And it also creates this weirdness when you think about the fact that, like, a big shtick for him on his channel was making fun of how old he was. All of his subscribers would call him a grandpa. They, like, videos of him and his girlfriend, they would always be like, "It's so nice for Kelsey to bring her grandpa on her YouTube channel." Like, that was a shtick, and then that just gained this really weird dimension when all of this started coming out. I also recently saw iNabber's recent video about the situation. He went over old tweets of Tana's that confirmed that she really was a fan of Cody at the time. I did believe her, but I just thought, like, maybe she was a casual fan, because I just didn't know specifics. I knew, like, the big YouTubers that she loved. I knew she loved Shane Dawson growing up. I knew she loved Jenna, but I didn't know that she was a fan. And he brought up tweets saying that she loved him, that she wished he was her best friend. So there's definitely a fan and idol type relationship there when she was really young, like 14, 15 years old. This was also partially probably due to me just being less aware of Cody's influence and his content around that time period. So as part of a lot of the other responses that this D'Angelo video helped to spark, Brittany Broski also released a statement. She has collaborated with Cody and has said that she's a fan of his. And her connection with Tana is also interesting. But so basically, she released this statement saying that if, quote, if it's proven to be true, meaning the allegations, that she is so disappointed as a fan, So the wording of if it's proven to be true upset a lot of people because it is something that would be hard to provide proof for, and in a lot of cases, things can have happened that you don't have proof for, but it still can be important to believe the person. Then other people were coming to Britney's defense saying that she may have been advised to word it that way for legal reasons since Cody is being accused of a crime. And I see both sides of the situation. Britney's perspective specifically, I think, upset people considering, like, a few months ago, there was an episode where Brooke and Tana talked about asking Britney to come on their podcast because they're a fan of her. And she said apparently that she would love to, but she gave this really graphic thing about, like, my fans would brutally murder me. They would, like, roast me over a spit if I was on your podcast. And gave this, like, just super unnecessarily graphic, like, rejection about how much her fans would hate if she was on the canceled podcast. And, like, so many people commented on that episode of, like, I'm a fan of both of y'all. Like, I honestly don't know what Britney's on. Like, you guys have a ton of fan overlap. I've never seen Britney's content. I've seen, like, 90 seconds of one video once I realized that apparently she's really popular. And a lot of fans of Tana and Brooke are also fans of her. I didn't really resonate with her videos, just the 90 seconds that I saw. But she definitely has a lot of people who are a big fan of her and think she's really funny. But there were people that when they found out about this, they called out hypocrisy on Britney's part because she has been on a lot of men's podcasts that apparently are equally or more controversial. Like, I've never seen any really of Theo Von's content, but apparently he's very controversial and she's been on his podcast. So she will co-sign a lot of behavior of men, but then apparently is like, oh, I can't go on these women's podcasts because my fans will be so up in arms and da-da-da. So this hesitance of her to be around Tana or associated with Tana, I think may also have partly influenced people's reactions to her statement on this situation. There was also a Reddit post posing the theory that Cody dated someone else when she was a minor. So an old Vine of his resurfaced of him kissing a girl on the back of the head, and also a photo of them at some kind of music festival with her on his shoulders. People also found an old post that this girl was tagged in around her birthday, and then when people did the math, apparently around those posts that she was in with Cody, she would have been 17 and or newly 18 at the time that he was like 24, 25. I've heard both 17 and 18, so I just want to cover that also is like a little bit of a question mark, but people are wondering if this speaks to a pattern of behavior on his part. Someone else on TikTok also came forward and alleged that Cody was Snapchatting her when she was a minor, like 15 years old. Then when she was asked for proof, she provided a screenshot of her messages and showed that she did have a conversation with him. But obviously on Snapchat, like, unless you know to take screenshots in the moment, you're not really going to have old conversations. And all you can really have as proof is, like, showing that you interacted previously. Kiki Chanel also made a really interesting video about this that I watched recently, where she also talks about, like, at this time period, it was just an element of the culture that, like, guys would just drop their Snapchat and have girls add them, especially because at the time you didn't automatically follow somebody when you added them if they were like an influencer or a celebrity or something. I don't really know the intricacies of Snapchat very well. I've never been a big Snapchat person, but she talks about how this kind of contributed to this open sort of relationship that these content creators, like often dudes, would be able to have with their fans regardless of what age they were. Kiki Chanel also posed a really interesting theory that, or like acknowledged the theory that some people have that Cody may have been using Kelsey or his relationship with Kelsey to cover up suspicion around this situation or divert conversation away from it. Apparently, Cody proposed to Kelsey just a few weeks after Tana first started publicly talking about them having hooked up. And initially, that could be a coincidence, but Kiki found an old podcast that Kelsey was on where she talks about thinking for months that Cody was going to propose to her, and he just never did. And she got to the point where she like literally gave up the idea of him proposing to her. Like she completely lost hope because just so many opportunities had gone by, and it just didn't seem like it was going to happen until Tana talked about this situation, and then a few weeks later it suddenly happened. So we don't know anything for sure, but if that's true, that is weird. That's weird. It's weird. It's weird. This also adds like additional dimension to the fact that Tana stated on the more recent episode of Canceled that Cody apparently texted her right after she started talking about the situation, asking if they were good and mentioning his upcoming wedding, which kind of additionally verifies this idea of him using his relationship with Kelsey as a way of diverting conversation or keeping people quiet. There's obviously no real evidence of his intentions of doing any of this, if this is true, or if this is all like, you know, a big distraction tactic to keep people from talking about the Tana situation. There's obviously like no real evidence of that, but that is a theory that I find interesting. Kelsey's past behavior is being legitimately criticized, even aside from people wondering how much she knew about the Tana situation, or even like the Colby situation, or how complicit she is with, you know, an alleged rapist being in her friend group, how much she knows, how much like what she thinks about that situation. There's still like a lot up for debate that we don't know about, but aside from that, her behavior is still being criticized, especially because she has previously worked as a school teacher, I believe an elementary school teacher. This is especially regarding her interactions with Emma Chamberlain when Emma was underage. Well, like her and Cody's interactions, especially one video where they're there when Emma tries a jewel for the first time, and Kelsey like feeds her first vape, and they make this big joke about it of like baby's first vape, da da da. I also wasn't there for like when teenagers were all into juuling and stuff, and that became a huge thing. I graduated high school like right around the time the Juul came out. But like vapes, you're not supposed to give a vape to someone under 18, and they literally videoed this. And also the fact that Kelsey was a school teacher adds an additional thing that people are questioning of like, there is kind of a certain standard of like how you're supposed to behave with like kids, you know, high school age kids, teenagers, whatever. Just super questionable. And also people were questioning the fact that like in that video and content they made together, Emma would call Kelsey and Cody her mom and dad, and they had this very like, oh, she's our little one and baby's first vape and da-da-da. So definitely this like infantilizing, acknowledging that she's very young thing. And then people are contrasting that with the way that he treated Tana at the time, and people are wondering if that had something to do with their positions in life, with the way they were raised, that Emma seems to have come from a more loving household, more privileged, whereas Tana was more hardened at a young age, more taken advantage of, way younger, raised in a more abusive household. And also she like more heavily sexualizes herself. Emma would then go on to develop a severe nicotine addiction, which she has been very open about. So that might contribute to people thinking that their actions were wrong as well. But whether Kelsey was aware or complicit in the Tana situation or the Colby situation is still up for debate. Cody is still yet to respond or acknowledge the situation in any way. At this point, people are speculating that he's probably being advised not to say anything for legal reasons, which is understandable because you're kind of, you know, in a corner. If you say this happened or acknowledge it, you are admitting to a crime. And if you deny it, then you're further painting yourself in a corner and setting yourself up to contradict yourself possibly in the future. But he did a DJ set at Encore Beach Club, which many people are calling the worst influencer apology ever. People are kind of like taking it as an apology, or like the closest thing they're going to get to an acknowledgement of this, especially because he chose to include Sorry by Justin Bieber in the set list, which many people are thinking was very deliberate and like a very tacky reference to this situation. Meanwhile, his friends and wife have not commented on the situation either, even though Kelsey in particular is continuing to be harassed for the alleged actions of her husband. So, going from the new additions and new events and new perspectives to the reaction, kind of back to the general public reaction to this. A lot of the reactions have been disappointing. We're going to kind of go through the big pillars of people's negative reactions to this situation. Obviously, because this involves allegations of crimes and otherwise just like very morally questionable behavior, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not telling you what to think. happened or anything like that. I'm just expressing my opinion based on what has been shared on the internet. And a lot of this involves conjecture and assuming what some of these people would have to say about other situations. I obviously don't know these people, but I've seen different comments, and I'm kind of just like taking those and comparing it to discourse that I've seen about other situations that are arguably similar. Like the James Charles situation, for instance, where people felt very comfortable denouncing it. It was pretty unanimous across the internet that his actions were wrong, and everyone seemed to come to a pretty quick consensus about that. Compared to this, where people are more willing to hold on to, well, if it was age of consent, and if she lied about her age, and if someone doesn't know that you're a teenager, much more willing to create this gray area of it actually being morally acceptable, or even like not even talking about the moral acceptability of it, but just being like, he didn't commit a crime, so therefore it's fine and we don't have to acknowledge it. Personally, I wonder if the difference in reactions has to do with a difference in fan base, because even though James has always had a huge reach, like multiple times bigger than Cody, he has always been known to have more children in his fan base and have a generally more polished image, compared to Cody, who has always had more of like a frat boy energy that's always appealed more to kind of like teenagers and older. And he also appeals to girls as well, even though he does have that kind of frat boy energy. I wonder if him being like more likable to the people that would criticize behavior of someone like a James Charles, if that has to do with those people being a little more hesitant to criticize his behavior. But another element of it is definitely the fact that Tana is the one speaking about it. She is not the most credible person on the internet. I have made a video about her where I say I'm a very conflicted fan, and I do acknowledge that she's very flawed. She's done a lot of shit wrong that she hasn't always fully owned up to, even though she probably would say that she has. So a big criticism of Tana specifically is, one, people think that she is doing this for clout and views and attention, which I would say I fully believe that she did not mean for this clip to get out. Yes, she has talked about the situation before, like on her podcast, but I just don't think she ever meant for it to get all this attention. And I believe her when she says that she's never really consciously viewed it as a trauma. I don't think she would necessarily have the intentions of like trying to get him in trouble for this trauma that he inflicted on her. Also, I feel like it's worth mentioning that she has never mentioned his name in any titles or thumbnails or anything like that. And even if I were less of a fan of her, I would still say this. Tana is doing just fine. Like, honestly, she, just in subscriber count on their main channel, she is not far behind him at all. She is extremely relevant. She gets millions of views on her videos. Videos by big commentary channels talking about her always get tons of views. She has one of the top 10 most successful podcasts in the world. She has going on she's been on multiple super successful tours this year. She is raking in money, and she still has a very dedicated fan base that's very loyal and protective to her. So I just personally don't believe, even with her propensity for exaggerating things, I just don't believe that she feels the need to fabricate. First of all, I don't think she would fabricate something like this. I choose to believe her in elements like on things like this and her stalker stories. Yeah, maybe some things in that were kind of exaggerated, but especially her more recent stalker that she's been talking about, I choose to believe her on things like that. I personally don't think she would lie about something like this. But I also just don't think she would feel the need to lie about something like this for clout and attention. Like, I think she's doing just fine. And there was definitely legitimate criticism on my previous video, like I mentioned, about the way that I presented the information, providing sources, etc. There were also a lot of attitudes in my comments, and also just other comments that I've seen and the general discourse around this, that have been extremely disappointing, saying that if she was the age of consent, what is the issue? Someone on my video was like, isn't the age of consent like 16? So if she fit that, then what is even the problem? Why do we care? It's one, the age of consent was not 16 where this allegedly took place, but the fact that it was like implying that a 16-year-old and a 25-year-old could theoretically like be okay also, like, yeah, I disagree with that as well. Where this allegedly took place, she was not the age of consent, so yes, it would have been a crime, allegedly. Allegedly. My argument is also that legality does not always equal morality, and it's still very morally questionable of why a 25-year-old would want to be hooking up with a 17-year-old in the first place, especially knowing her age. It is a huge mental difference between 17 and 25 that I definitely think, in my opinion, speaks to someone taking advantage of someone much less emotionally mature than them. which goes to my next point, the fact that Tana has always identified herself as being more mature for her age, having grown up really quickly, and saying that she does not consciously acknowledge this situation as having been traumatic for her. And some people have taken that to mean that she has said she doesn't care about it, which is not true. She has never said that she does not care. She said that she does not consciously view it as a trauma, but that she objectively knows that it's wrong, and that if it had happened to someone else that same age that she was close to, that she would have had a different reaction, and that she would, quote, I would kill. She was like, I would kill if that was my little sister or a 17-year-old friend or a close friend of mine, like, that I was protective of, especially when she was underage. So she acknowledges that she objectively views it as wrong, even, and also acknowledges that it may have had an effect on her that she just didn't consciously feel, that she just wasn't consciously aware of, but she acknowledges that this could have very likely affected her. I think it's fair to say that she has conflicting feelings about it, but I don't personally get a complacency or an apathy towards it, or a sense that she doesn't think anything should be done about it, or that this was just okay to have happened. I've also seen a lot of people say that it is a boy who cried wolf situation, and that Tana just shouldn't be expected to be believed about something like this with everything that she's lied and exaggerated about. I personally think that this is a cop-out, and I do think that this is an example of the perfect victim archetype being used against somebody, especially considering there are multiple corroborations of a specific instance that she's talking about. Tana definitely has a history of exaggerating. She has serious main character syndrome, and she often seems to try to make herself as blameless as possible while also seeming to take accountability, such as in the TanaCon situation. And then in more serious situations, she also will seem to take accountability while also being like really underhanded and malicious about it at the same time, like in the way that she treated Simply Nessa, which I don't think was okay. I definitely don't think she's blameless in a lot of aspects, and I definitely think she can be an unreliable narrator at a lot of times. However, I do not think that this is one of those times, and I choose to believe her. I think just like negating the third-party corroborations and negating this history of her having talked about it for that, I think is a little intellectually lazy. And you can think what you want, but I can also think that that's intellectually lazy and disappointing, and I have strong opinions about it. And you can have strong opinions about it, and we can have opinions about it, and it's okay. So that is basically the update on the Cody and Tana situation. New perspectives, new people talking about it, the way that the discourse on this has just exploded. I feel like everyone on the internet has talked about this at this point. Like every podcast, just every commentary channel, just everybody. So it's definitely really expanded, and it seems like the general feelings about it have started to shift, and people are allowing for more of a discourse around it. And also seems like his moderators on his Reddit have just given up when it comes to censoring conversation about the situation. So we just are gonna see if this continues to unfold, if he replies in any way, if anything comes from this. This is just becoming just a bigger and bigger issue, and yeah. Feel like that's kind of all there is to say. Like, it is disappointing, and I feel like I just don't have much of an outro for this video. I wrote this whole script and then I didn't write my outro, so that is basically the situation so far. I think I will continue to talk about it if more things happen with it. Hello, lovely people. So I made the video that you just watched, I believe almost 3 months ago, and pretty much the day that I filmed it, it came out, one Patreon content from Canceled got leaked on the internet, where Tana was talking about how she and Cody started messaging when she was like 16, and when she had just barely started making YouTube videos, and he was like a really established Viner, and they were DMing back and forth. So he was DMing his minor fans who had like no social media presence of their own, and then later on went to have a sexual relationship with them, which makes things even weirder. And then Tiny Meat Gang, production company that Cody co-owns, released this super vague, kind of misleading statement saying that Cody was going to not be involved in the day-to-day operations of the company anymore, therefore implying that he very much is still involved in the company and therefore profiting off of it. And then I remembered this thing that Tana said a while ago on an H3 interview, where she was talking about Jake Paul being accused of sexual assault. Some of the things that she said, considering how hurt she was by Brittany Broski's statement about the Cody Cole allegations, where Brittany was like, If it's proven to be true, I'm extremely hurt and disappointed as a fan, and Tana was like so profoundly offended by that. It is interesting looking back at some of the shit that Tana said earlier about this allegation of, I hate to say that I don't think someone had it in their character to do that, but I was with him all the time during that time, and I can't say he didn't do it, but I don't think he did it, which is like, you know what, you can have your opinion, that's fine. And the Cody situation hadn't really come out, and that public discourse about it hadn't come out, and she hadn't really been forced to re-examine her feelings about the situation yet, so I get that. But just in retrospect, it is interesting, kind of flirting with hypocritical, in my opinion.
But
Did you see that there was an article in the New York Times about him sexually assaulting someone? Did you read that?
I remember that for sure, that happening. And
Oh, you think it happened?
no.
okay.
Sorry.
When
sorry,
it
sorry.
came
no, I
out.
don't think that happened. I never want to be someone to invalidate a victim in any regard of anything, but I was with him at all times pretty much. And during that time,
You were with him at all times pretty much during that time, except for the dozens and dozens of scenes on your MTV show where he was nowhere to be found and you two were in entirely different locations, including your birthday episode where he spent the majority of your party threatening not to come unless you kicked out someone who he didn't like. But okay. And I almost forgot that in said birthday episode, once he finally showed up, he still left early. He barely stayed at the party, and he still left you there. So y'all still ended up in different locations.
I hate that it's wrong to say I don't think based on someone's character they'd do that, because then people would be like,
Well, yeah, I mean,
the truth is the truth, and I stand with whatever the truth
and
is.
people-
Did it ever go to court?
Again, I understand that she likely had a different perspective on what had happened to her at this time, but genuinely, what is the difference between saying the truth is the truth and I agree with whatever the truth is, and if it is proven to be true, I am heartbroken and disappointed as a fan? I understand both sides of that situation, and how that if it's proven to be true maybe sounded a little I'll believe it when I see it, and how that could possibly be hurtful. But considering how hurt she was by that comment, it's interesting that she basically said the exact same thing in different words when talking about someone who was accusing someone she knows of sexual misconduct. And maybe I'm nitpicking here, and her asking if it ever went to court was just purely out of curiosity and had nothing to do with whether or not she believed the person. But it is interesting. And in my opinion, there's a little sense of the I'll believe it when I see it energy. But again, I could be wrong.
And I'm no longer in my defending Jake Paul dying on that hill era anyway, so
Good.
he can just,
Good.
it's his own journey.
I mean, I know I'm not in your head, but I just genuinely don't believe that.
you think he didn't do it? It's okay if you have an opinion. I mean, from what you can tell.
I don't think he did. You can't say he didn't do it. I don't think he did it. But,
Okay.
I mean, if he did do it, then obviously he should pay the consequences, and I don't fucking know.
I keep adding in clips because I want there to be no doubt that my use of this video falls within fair use, but again, it's just interesting to me the way she kind of dances around trying to say that she doesn't believe the person, and the way she's kind of allowing for herself to be wrong, but like not really, of you can't say he didn't do it, but I don't think he did it, which, you know, fair opinion. And nobody owes anyone belief in exchange for being believed. So I don't think not believing someone's story necessarily means you don't deserve to have your story believed. It's not like that, but it just rubs me the wrong way. It just rubs me the wrong way. Considering that her perspective on things that have happened to her has changed since the Cody allegations became super public, and considering how hurt she was by Britney's statement, it just makes me wonder how she would feel if someone said this about her situation. So that's basically everything about the Cody and Tana updated situation. This whole experience just reminds me how spineless and inconsistent the internet is, honestly. It's just, everyone is just constantly looking for permission to think what they think and be able to say what they say, and you'll make fun of people for disagreeing with you until your fave suddenly agrees with them, and then you agree with them, and it's just, yeah, there's, obviously, it's not everybody, but in general, it's just such a mob mentality, and it is depressing. It's extremely depressing. Yeah, especially when it involves people coming forward about serious stuff. And I have basically no respect for Tana, like as a person, just for context, like the Tana's Angels situation that I'm gonna talk about in the future, and just so much shit that she's done. I'm done watching the canceled podcast. I unsubscribed. Like I'm just not in it anymore. I just have no respect for them, honestly. And I still believe her. I still believe those allegations. It's just annoying and disheartening. But yeah. Suddenly it's okay to think that it's wrong to fuck a 17-year-old when you're 25. At least for some people. For some people, fortunately, it's always been fucked up. But apparently that was like weird to say. I don't know. And then there's this whole complete side note. Speaking of people being alleged fucking groomers, Brittany Manson apparently dated a 17-year-old when she was 28. And everyone's all like, it's legal in her country. So like, what's even the big deal? With the whole point is that legality does not equal morality. And also people in the comments being like, I'm 17 and I had an ex that was way older than me, but it wasn't grooming because I was attracted to him as well. And it's like, girl, that's literally not the point. And I hate to say it, but you were definitely groomed. I didn't comment that, but like, it's just crazy. Like the disconnect that still exists for some people. And the fact that so many of these people would still say that they're victim advocates. They're advocates for victims, but they don't even see like the disconnect. Not saying you can't be an advocate, you can't be a victim advocate, but it's just like insane that people don't see the double standard and the disconnect between that. So it's like, what kind of victims are you an advocate for? You know? I don't know. Food for thought. So I'm in a weird ass mood if you can't tell. I'm kind of weirdly aggressive, so maybe I shouldn't have gone on and continued this video, but I just want to finish it and I just want to put it up. It's a super old topic, but I just wanted to put out my revised thing on it and giving a more detailed summary, and also just saying the internet's reaction to it and just the sudden sway from the number of people that just suddenly swayed from everyone's making such a big deal out of this. It's nothing. It's not illegal. So why do we even care? And it's Tana and blah, 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 to suddenly, oh, this is fucked up. Oh, this is whatever. And it's funny because those same people would likely have been on the train of James Charles being a predator for texting underage fans, which is predatory behavior. That's absolutely true. But having sex with a 17-year-old is suddenly, oh, well, it's the legality and the age of consent and this is normalized and da-da-da. It's gross. It's gross. It's gross. So that's about all I got to say about that. I'm going to talk about the Tana's Angels and Alyssa Violet situation because I just, honestly, for like cathartic purposes at this point, I just need to like vomit out all my thoughts and opinions that I still have on Tana and all the shit that she's done so that I can just not talk about it anymore because I just don't want to talk about her anymore. But I just do want to get that out. So this is the second to last installment of my venting about these random people on the internet series, and I hope you enjoyed. I wasn't in quite as sparkly of a mood as I normally am, but it's real, and this was irritating. So, yeah. Let me know what you thought of this debacle. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!